Hello, welcome to Nonprofits for the Future, the roadmap to new funding sources. I'm Drew Heckman and you're in Module 3. In this section, we will discuss various pricing tactics, how they might apply to your earned income idea, and how that might contribute to crafting the ideal pricing strategy. Before we continue, you should have at least completed the following: all the worksheets from Modules 1 and 2, as well as the market size worksheet. Just be sure to also download the pricing tactics worksheet. One quick definition before we get started. Essentially, pricing tactics are strategies to determine how to set your prices on products and services. As usual, look before you leap. Do your research. Vet your idea, analyze, and plan. And in this context, that means analyzing the competitive landscape. That is, how are your competitors pricing similar products or services and why? So let's get into it. What are the basic types of pricing strategies? There are a few we're going to cover here: market-based, cost-plus, differentiated or flexible, and psychological. There are also more, but most of them will fall under the psychological category. The three: market-based, cost-plus, and differentiated are the bread and butter. What's the point of pricing strategies? One, it's to look at the competitive landscape. It's to see what's out there and see how you can compare to the pricing that's in the marketplace. Helps you explore pricing options. It also helps you empathize with your customer. You really are able to get into their mind and see what might be influencing their decisions. And finally, it helps you determine your ideal pricing strategy by looking at different pricing tactics. Let's get into the different pricing strategy types. The first is market-based. So this is the classical or common sense approach to determine your price. It's essentially taking a look at what your competitors are charging for similar products or services, and then basing your price off of the competitive landscape. So can you price similarly? Can you undercut what they're doing or overprice? If you undercut to provide the inexpensive option, that is one thing to do. It could also have the risk of appearing cheap. Conversely, if you overprice, why would you want to do that? Well, maybe you want to charge more because you have a unique selling proposition over your competitors, or you want to appear as the high-end option. Sometimes charging more can have the perception that there's a higher value as well. This is most commonly found in highly competitive spaces where consumers are aware of the prices. It isn't as applicable in spaces that either aren't that competitive or the prices aren't fully viewable to the public. So maybe it's something that's online, but it's not easily searchable to go out and find what your other options are. So let's look at an example of market-based pricing. Think of food trucks in a park. All the food trucks are lined up in one area, and all the prices are displayed very visibly. And let's just assume that three of them are selling tacos. There's three taco trucks all within walking distance of each other. Typically, the lowest price is going to win if all else is equal. Like, for example, if the food basically tastes the same and there's no particular customer loyalty, then you're pretty much going to probably choose the one that's $5 for two tacos instead of $7 for two tacos. That's the way I would do it. But let's look at some other factors in market-based pricing for our food truck example. Some of the things that might influence how you want to price is your branding or reputation or quality. Let's say you have a customer loyalty and you know that even if you charge $7, you're still going to have your customers come to you. So you're not so concerned about the guy that's charging $5 because you know that your $7 taco is still going to sell. You could also consider the cost to produce the food. Maybe it costs me a little bit more, and so that's why I charge a little bit more. You also might consider taking a loss for future gains. So for example, selling it at a loss or at cost now in order to win new customers from a competitor in the future. Let's take a look at our second type, cost plus. So this is how much you would consider that it costs you to provide the product or service. Similar to our last food truck example when we said, how much does it cost you to produce the food? And this includes everything, include all expenses that go into the production or the product or the service. Once you consider how much everything costs to produce the product or service, you would then set your price point above that. The reason you would do this is it guarantees a profit. And I put guarantees in quotes because it may not necessarily guarantee a profit. Maybe you have to consider what your competitors would be doing, and maybe it wouldn't actually guarantee you a profit because you can't sell anything. And how much you profit would depend on the margin or the markup you assign. I put those in quotes in case you haven't heard of them before. The markup is how much you mark the price up above what it costs you. And the margin is the difference between how much you set the price and your cost. Very similar concepts. This is most common in retail, manufacturing, engineering, or food industries, anything that requires a lot of production costs. This is especially relevant if you know that there is a high demand so that you can almost guarantee that profit. If you produce a ton and you set your prices but nobody buys, well, you haven't really guaranteed a profit. Again, going back to that quotations guarantee. It's not a guarantee until somebody actually buys it. So in cost plus, also consider what happens if your competition adjusts. Again, can you really guarantee a profit then? Maybe my competitor used market-based and lowered their prices, and now I can't compete because my cost of production is too high, and I need to keep my prices high enough so that I'm not making a loss. But my competitor has figured out a way to produce the same stuff for a lower price, and they're just taking all the customers. Now I can't guarantee a profit anymore. Consider how you might readjust if the competition changes their strategy, and think of it like a chess game. Differentiated pricing is the gold standard. Basically, the question of pricing is, what is something worth? Whatever someone is willing to pay. Think about that for a second. How much is an apple worth? It might be worth 25 cents. It might be worth 1 cent. It might be worth $500, or might be worth $2,000. Maybe that apple was taken a bite out of by Kanye West, and somebody is a huge Kanye West fan and they really want to buy that apple. So the apple itself might only cost 1 cent to produce or make. You plant the apple seed and it grows, but there's some other value. And so think of pricing in the sense of what is someone willing to pay? So forget about cost plus and forget about market based. Find your customers that are willing to pay X price and charge. So this is where you adjust that price based on your customer product fit. Remember back to the canvas when we had our value proposition. Think about that customer and think about your product. Align the gains, the potential gains that they could want or the potential pains that they have, and adjust your price based on how important those things are to them. And you can also base your pricing on similar or identical products. So let me give you an example of what that means. Let's go forward and look at changing your price based on the ability or willingness to pay. There are 3 different types of the ability or willingness to pay that you could change your pricing based on similar or identical products. Let's take a look at 3 of them: customer segment pricing, product form pricing, and image pricing. Customer segment pricing is essentially charging customer groups differently for the same product or service. So for example, think about a museum that charges lower admission fees to students or seniors. Everybody knows that when you go to the museum and you see the prices listed, that they are charging different things for students or seniors. But I know that if I don't fall in those 2 categories, I'm okay with paying the higher price. I recognize the importance of the museum to charge less for students and charge less for seniors. And I've accepted that and I'm okay with it as a consumer. The nonprofit example would be having your service free for beneficiaries and having a charge for customers. Think back to Bikes Together, where they give away a bike for free to anyone up to a certain age, but they charge for the bikes for other customers that come through the doors. Product form pricing is interesting. So these are different forms of the product that are charged at different prices. And it may also not be proportional to the size of the thing. For example, think about soft drinks. You might pay $4.99 for a small at the movie theater, $5.99 for a medium, and $6.99 for a large. But the large is twice as big as the small, but it doesn't cost twice as much. And people know this, but they're still willing to pay either $4.99 for the small because they just don't want that much, or $6.99 for the large because they think, well, I'm getting a better bang for my buck. Another example is maybe a 1 liter bottle of water is $1.99. They might sell that same water as a 2-ounce moisturizer, and ounces are smaller than liters. So a very small 2-ounce moisturizer spray for $6.99. So you have this big water bottle that you drink. So the function is drinking for $1.99. And it's the same stuff. It's still water, but all they did was put it in a different bottle, put a little spray nozzle on the top, sell it as a moisturizer, rebrand it, and call it $6.99. So think about different ways that you could change the form of your product to get people to buy at different price points. Another one is called image pricing. So this is the same product in a different image, a little bit different than the form. This is where you upcharge for a fancier branding. An example would be perfume, where you might have a perfume in a not so aesthetically pleasing bottle. It just doesn't look expensive. So maybe you only charge $15 for it. Maybe you have the same perfume, but you put it in a really fancy bottle, hardly cost you anything more. You just made it look really expensive and you charged it for $79. Another example is thinking back to our models of white labeling. It's the same product that you get from the big brand, but they sell it to you and you're able to rebrand it with your own. Well, you probably charge less in the brand that you have because it doesn't have the same association, even though the product is exactly the same. Food presentation is another example where you would actually charge more for the fancier branding. If I gave you a food on a plate, but it didn't look very appealing, maybe you'd only pay $5 for it. That same food tastes the same, but I have a very fancy plating. Maybe I'm known for that, and I charge $25 for the same exact food. One could argue that the food does taste better if it's presented better, I suppose. Okay, a few more examples of differentiated pricing. Luxury cars versus used cars. They might be similar, they're both cars, but you wouldn't waste your time selling a luxury car to someone that you know can't afford it, and you wouldn't sell a used car to someone that comes in and tells you how much they want to spend. Similarly, with airline prices, they jack up the prices when they know that the demand is high and when they know that a lot of people are looking to buy flights. There's all sorts of strategies on airline pricing as well, but they totally differentiate based on who their consumer is, who their customer is, what time of day they're buying, have they looked at the site before, things like that, and actually track those things. Early bird pricing is another example. It's the same product, but if you buy early or you buy within 24 hours, then you get a cheaper, less expensive price. Two others are need-based and high-end based. So need-based is a pain reliever. You can price based on the need if it is alleviating some sort of pain point for your customer. Similarly, you can have a high-end based. If you are creating a bonus or a gain for your consumer, you might be able to charge differently if it's something that you know they really want and they're willing to pay a premium. So that's it for differentiated pricing. And that will also end the 3 different types of pricing strategies. And next we'll talk about psychological pricing.